Om Aganda Timarandasya Ganajana Shivakaya Chakshur Umrisamyena Tajma Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him.
Krishna Kirtana Bhanana Tanapano.
Hare Krishna. Welcome back to this video series on the Bhagavad Gita as it is, translated by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are finishing Chapter 2, Contents of the Gita Summarized. Krishna continues to encourage Arjuna to remain fixed in his service, fight, and ignore the mind's desires. Krishna explains both Buddhi Yoga, intelligence used in spiritual advancement of knowledge, and karma, work. Arjuna becomes confused and wishes to use Krishna's instructions to perform Buddhi Yoga as an excuse to retire from the battlefield for a life of contemplation. Text number 39. Thus far, I have declared to you the analytical knowledge of Sankhya philosophy. Now listen to the knowledge of yoga, whereby one works without fruit or result. O son of Pritha, when you act by such intelligence, you can free yourself from the bondage of works. In this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose. Their aim is one, O beloved child of the Kurus. The intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. Men of small knowledge are very much attached to flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation into heavenly planets, resulting in good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification and opulent life, they say that there is nothing more than this. The minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination of devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. The Vedas mainly deal with the subject of the three modes of material nature. Rise above these modes, O Arjuna. Be transcendental to all of them. Be free from all dualities and from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. All purposes that are served by the small pond can at once be served by great reservoirs of water. Similarly, all the purposes of the Vedas can be served by one who knows the purpose behind them. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself to be the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. Be steadfast in yoga, O Arjuna. Perform your duty and abandon all attachment to success or failure. Such evenness in mind is called yoga. O Dhananjaya, rid yourself of all fruitive activities by devotional service, and surrender fully to that consciousness. Those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work are misers. A man engaged in devotional service rids himself of both good and bad actions, even in this life. Therefore strive for yoga, O Arjuna, which is the art of all work. The Lord begins by changing topics. Text 39 through 41, he talks about the benefits of yoga. In the purport to text 39, Srila Prabhupada clarifies what is Sankhya Yoga, according to the Nirukti, or the Vedic dictionary. Sankhya means that which describes phenomena in detail, and Sankhya refers to that philosophy which describes the real nature of the soul, and yoga involves controlling the senses. He further explains that Arjuna has already accepted Krishna as a spiritual master by surrendering himself unto him. Consequently, Krishna will now tell him about the working process of Buddhi Yoga, or Karma Yoga, or in other words, the practice of devotional service only for the sense gratification of the Lord. This Buddhi Yoga is clearly explained in chapter 10, verse 10, as being direct communion with the Lord, who is sitting as Paramatma in everyone's heart. but such communion does not take place without devotional service. One who is therefore situated in devotional or transcendental loving service of the Lord, or, in other words, in Krishna consciousness, attains to the stage of Buddha Yoga by the special grace of the Lord. The Lord says, therefore, that only to those who are always engaged in devotional service, out of transcendental love, does He award pure knowledge of devotion in love. In that way, the devotee can reach Him easily in the ever-blissful kingdom of God. The popular yoga one sees today is a higher form of gymnastics. There is a whole philosophy that is behind the physical practice most people see. The yoga exercises are good for the body. The philosophy of yoga is good for the brain. Most people have no understanding of spiritual life. They have little or no realization of the soul in the body. And due to their ignorance, they are mostly attached to fruitive activities. These different activities under the control of our senses grant us temporary enjoyment. They are also what binds us to repeated birth and death. When someone does anything for the Lord, he never forgets it. Those actions for the pleasure of the Lord are never lost and remain in one's spiritual bank account. Even if one struggles or falls down, there is no loss for one who tries to please the Supreme Lord. Unlike Mayavadis, who, so-called spiritualists, want to give up their identity and merge into the Brahmajyoti, devotees of the Lord want to keep their unique identity and serve the Lord with love. In text 45, Krishna introduces the readers to the three modes of material nature. All action in this world is a result of these three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. They will be explained in more detail later in chapter 14. Srila Prabhupada, in his purport to text 45, gives us an initial understanding of the three modes of nature. All material activities involve actions and reactions in the three modes of material nature. They are meant for fruitive results, which cause bondage in the material world. The Vedas deal mostly with fruitive activities to gradually elevate the general public to the field of sense gratification to a position on the transcendental plane. Arjuna, as a student and friend of Lord Krishna, is advised to raise himself to the transcendental position of Vedanta philosophy. As long as the material body exists, there are actions and reactions in the material modes. One has to learn tolerance in the face of dualities such as happiness and distress, or cold and warmth, and tolerating such dualities become free from anxieties regarding gain and loss. This transcendental position is achieved in full Krishna consciousness when one is fully dependent on the goodwill of Krishna. Text 51. The wise engage in devotional service, take refuge in the Lord, and free themselves from the cycle of birth and death by renouncing the fruits of actions in the material world. In this way, they can attain that state beyond all miseries. When your intelligence has passed out of the dense forest of delusion, you shall become indifferent to all that has been heard and all that is to be heard. When your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, and when it remains fixed in trance of self-realization, then you will attain the divine consciousness. Arjuna said, "What are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak? What is his language? And how does he sit? How does he walk?" The Blessed Lord said, "O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties of sense desire, which arise from mental concoction, and when his mind finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure, transcendental consciousness. One who is not disturbed in spite of the three-mode miseries, who is not elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger, is called a sage of steady mind. He who is without attachment, who does not rejoice when he obtains good, nor lament when he obtains evil, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. One who is able to withdraw the senses from sense objects, as a tortoise draws his limbs within the shell, is to be understood as truly situated in knowledge. The embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, though the taste for sense objects remain. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. The senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. One who restrains his senses and fixes his consciousness upon me is known as a man of steady intelligence. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that detached work leads to realized knowledge of the soul. When one thus becomes self-realized, he can gradually become blessed with knowledge of the Lord and can surrender unto Him. Such surrender frees him from the material world, and after liberation, he becomes eligible to attain Vaikuntha. This progression is known as the Yoga Ladder. The Yoga Ladder is detailed in the first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. How we attain fruitive benefits is described in the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas. Krishna here compares it to a dense forest of material illusion. Arjuna is preoccupied with a fruitive mentality. He thinks that happiness is impossible to obtain and misery is certain if he performs his duty of fighting. Krishna tells him, however, that by fighting with buddhi or knowledge, he will achieve fixed intelligence and become indifferent to the happiness and distress. Arjuna asks Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? Arjuna wants to know how to recognize one in divine consciousness. He asks, what are his symptoms? Krishna answers, when a man gives up all varieties of sense gratification and with a purified mind, he finds satisfaction in the self alone. Arjuna asks, what does he speak? Krishna responds in text 56, one who is not disturbed in mind, even amidst the threefold miseries, or elated when there is happiness, or one who is free from attachment, fear, and anger, is called a sage of steady mind. The threefold miseries are: 1, those miseries we bring upon ourselves, we fall off a ladder, or we touch fire. 2, those miseries brought on by other living entities, we get bit by a snake or assaulted by another person. And then 3, there are those miseries brought on by Mother Nature, tornadoes or hurricanes, etc. Arjuna continues to ask, how does he sit? Arjuna wants to know, does he not engage his senses? Krishna explains, one who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects, as the tortoise draws his limbs within his shell, is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. Krishna is telling Arjuna, do not give up work, do not become a jnani, a man who simply discriminates between matter and spirit. Perform your duty in buddhi yoga. Krishna is showing Arjuna the defect of jnana in order to show the superiority of bhakti yoga. For a transcendentalist, renunciation is not difficult because he has a higher taste. Krishna herein indicates that this is especially true of Vaishnavas. By engaging their senses in Krishna's service, devotees naturally and fully withdraw them from matter, especially after experiencing Krishna's beauty. In his commentary to text 61, Srila Prabhupada explains, unless one is transcendently situated, it is not possible to cease from sense enjoyment. The process of restriction from sense enjoyment by rules and regulations is something like restricting a diseased person from certain types of edibles. The patient, however, is neither like such restrictions nor loses his taste for edibles. Similarly, sense restriction by some spiritual process like Ashtanga Yoga is recommended for less intelligent persons who have no better knowledge. But one who has the taste, the beauty of the Supreme Lord Krishna, in the course of his advancement in Krishna consciousness, no longer has a taste for dead material things. Therefore, restrictions are there for the less intelligent neophytes in the spiritual advancement of life. But such restrictions are only good until one actually has a taste for Krishna consciousness. When one is actually Krishna conscious, he automatically loses his taste for pale things. Text 62. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment lust develops, and from lust anger arises. From anger, delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. One who can control his senses by practicing the regulated principles of freedom can attain the complete mercy of the Lord and thus become free from all attachment and aversion. For one who is so situated in divine consciousness, the threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer. In such a happy state, one's intelligence soon becomes steady. One who is not in transcendental consciousness can have neither a controlled mind nor steady intelligence, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? As a boat on the water is swept away by a strong wind, even one of the senses on which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence. Therefore, O mighty armed, one whose senses are restrained from their objects is certainly of steady intelligence. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled, and the time of awakening for all beings is the night for the introspective sage. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like the rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy his senses. A person who gives up all desire for sense gratification, who lives free from desires, who has given up all sense of proprietorship and is devoid of false ego, he alone can attain real peace. That is the way of spiritual and godly life, after attaining which a man is not bewildered. Being so situated, even at the hour of death, one can enter into the kingdom of God. Krishna makes an interesting point in verse 62 and 63. He states that while contemplating the object of the senses, a person develops an attachment for them, and from such attachment lust develops, and from lust anger arises, from anger complete delusion arises, and from delusion bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. That is a sequence of events that drag us down into the clutches of material life. The mind must be fixed on something. If we don't fix it on Krishna, then we get an alternative result, that being lost in this material world under the control of the three modes of nature. And Srila Prabhupada's purport to verse 64 sheds some light on this subject. It is already explained that one may externally control the senses by some artificial process. But unless the senses are engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord, there is every chance of one falling down. Although the person is in full Krishna consciousness, may apparently be on the sensual plane, because of his being Krishna consciousness, he has no attachment to sensual activities. The Krishna conscious person is concerned only with the satisfaction of Krishna and nothing else. Therefore, he is transcendental to all attachment and detachment. If Krishna wants, the devotee can do anything which is ordinarily undesirable. And if Krishna does not want, he shall not do that which he would have ordinarily done for his own sense gratification. Therefore, to act or not to act is within the control, because he acts only under the direction of Krishna. This consciousness is the causeless mercy of the devotee, which the devotee can achieve in spite of his being attached to the sensual platform. Now, beginning with text 64 and continuing almost until the end of chapter 2, Krishna answers Arjuna's last question. How does he walk? The purport of this question is, how does a man in transcendence engage his senses? Srila Prabhupada explains this more in his comments to verse 66. Unless one is in Krishna consciousness, there is no possibility of peace. So it is confirmed in the 5th chapter, text 29, that when one understands that Krishna is the only enjoyer of all the good results of sacrifice and penance, and that he is the proprietor of all universal manifestations, and that he is the real friend of all living entities, then only can one have real peace. Therefore, one is not in Krishna consciousness, there cannot be a final goal for the mind. Disturbance is due to the ultimate goal. And when one is certain that Krishna is the enjoyer, proprietor, and friend of everyone and everything, then one can, with a steady mind, bring about peace. Therefore, one who is engaged without a relationship with Krishna is certainly always in distress and without peace. However much he may make a show of peace and spiritual advancement in life, Krishna consciousness is a self-manifested, peaceful condition which can be achieved only in relationship with Krishna. Everyone should know that if one does anything for the Lord, he never forgets it. Those actions for the pleasure of the Lord are never lost and remain in one's spiritual bank account. Even if one struggles or falls down, there is no loss for one who tries to please the Lord. Many topics have been discussed in this chapter. The Vedas, the modes of material nature, Karma Kanda, Karma Yoga, Gyan, Sankhya, Buddhi Yoga, Vedanta, the Atma, detachment, Samadhi, Sannyas, and Bhakti Yoga. Srila Bhaktivedanta Thakur has summarized this second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita as being the contents for the whole text. In the Bhagavad Gita, the subject matters are Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. In the second chapter, Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga have been clearly discussed, and a glimpse of Bhakti Yoga has also been given. That concludes this chapter. Thank you for watching. Next, we will discuss Chapter 3, entitled Karma Yoga. Hare Krishna.
Bande Rupa Sanatana Raghujuga Sriji Bhagopalako Krishna Kirtana Ganana Tana Param Premam Dhira Dhira Jana Priya Priya Kana Nima Sadam Pujito Krishna Kirtana